Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever felt like something isn't quite real in the world? Maybe a subtle sense of detachment, or that the lines between what's authentic and what's manufactured are getting blurrier?
Yeah, like things feel a bit off sometimes.
Exactly. Well, today we're diving into a concept that tries to explain that feeling, hyperreality. We're going to explore excerpts from Hyperreality, The Engineered Illusion and Consciousness Control, and we'll look into its academic origins, but also the controversial claims that it's a deliberate plot.
And maybe try to figure out why this idea just won't seem to go away, right?
Right. Why it resonates.
Our goal today is really to help you wrap your head around this fascinating, often sort of mind-bending idea.
Yeah.
We'll trace it from its philosophical roots all the way to these pretty chilling claims of it being an engineered illusion. And then, of course, look at the mainstream counter-arguments.
Which raises that big question for you, the listener. Why does a theory like this resonate so deeply with us right now?
Yeah, what's fascinating here is that core paradox.
Yeah.
This world where copies can feel more real than the originals.
And how that idea, whether you see it as just, a sociological observation or some kind of deliberate plot,
Yeah.
how it impacts your own understanding of truth.
Authenticity, yeah.
Okay, so to really understand hyperreality, we have to start with the philosophical foundation.
Really? It didn't just appear out of nowhere?
No. This concept, it really emerged from late 20th century postmodern philosophy. And the most influential figure here is the French sociologist and philosopher Jean Baudrillard.
Baudrillard, yeah. His 1981 book, Simulacra and Simulation, that's the key text.
That's the one. And at its heart is Baudrillard's core concept of simulacra, which are, well, essentially copies, but with a crucial twist.
They don't even have an original anymore. Or maybe ever did.
Right. Think of it like a heavily filtered social media photo that ends up looking better or maybe more real than the actual scene it supposedly represents.
And eventually, that filtered image just becomes the shared reality. It completely overshadows whatever was truly there.
That's a perfect way to put it.
And, to break down how we supposedly got to this point, Baudrillard outlines these 4 orders or stages of simulacra.
Okay.
So first you have what he calls a faithful image or copy. This is like a good, true reflection of some profound reality. Think of a classic portrait capturing a person's essence. Simple reflection.
Got it. Like a mirror.
Kind of. Then stage 2, it moves to a perversion of reality. This is where the copy starts to distort the original. Propaganda is a classic example, twisting facts to serve an agenda.
Okay, so distortion. Then what's third?
The third order is pretense of reality. This is where the representation actually masks the absence of a profound reality underneath.
Masks the absence. So
Imagine finding a fake historical document. It looks real, it feels real, but it's actually covering up the fact that there's no actual historical event it refers to. It's pretending there's a reality there when there isn't.
Okay, so we've gone from faithful copy to distortion to pretense, masking and absence. And then the final stage.
And then you arrive at the fourth order.
Mm-hmm.
The pure simulacrum, or hyperreality itself.
Ah!
This is where the representation has absolutely no relation to any reality whatsoever. The copy doesn't just mimic an original, it becomes the original. Or rather, there is no original.
Wow.
Reality itself starts getting generated from models, from copies that have no origin, no actual referent in the real world.
So the simulation just takes over.
Completely. The distinction between what's real and what's imaginary just collapses. The core insight here is that we've moved beyond simple misrepresentation, fake news or whatever, to a point where the copy itself defines reality.
And the original is just irrelevant or never existed.
Exactly. It's like the map becoming the territory, but we've completely forgotten there ever was a territory to map in the first place.
And when we live in this state, this hyper-real state, Baudrillard pointed out some really observable characteristic things you can almost see around you. First, there's that profound blurring of the real and the fake. The simulated thing becomes indistinguishable from the actual thing, or maybe even more desirable.
Right. Like virtual reality maybe feeling more engaging than actual reality for some people.
Yeah, or just think about how our lives are completely saturated by images and signs, media, advertising, entertainment. It's just constant.
An avalanche of images.
And this leads to what he called the loss of the referent. The original reality that all these signs and images were supposed to point back to, it just disappears.
Yeah.
Or maybe, like you said, it never existed. We're just left with the signs themselves.
It's like watching one of those cooking shows, The food looks absolutely incredible on screen, just perfect.
Oh, yeah.
But you never actually see the messy process, the chopping, the maybe burning something.
Yeah.
Just the final perfect plated dish. Eventually, the idea of the actual cooking kind of fades, and you only care about that perfect image.
That image becomes the reality of the food.
Exactly. And that's where things become more real than real. That's the hyperreal. Experiences or objects designed to be more vivid, more intense, maybe more satisfying than dull old reality.
And Baudrillard had some classic examples, didn't he?
He did. Think of Disneyland. It's not a copy of a real place, right? It's a total fantasy world, but it's often experienced as more real or compelling than the messy reality outside its gates.
The magic feels realer than real life.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Or reality TV.
Yeah.
It presents itself as reality, but it's heavily scripted, edited, manipulated to be way more dramatic and engaging than genuine everyday life.
Yeah, definitely not my reality.
Right. And news media, too, can easily become spectacle. The image, the narrative, the emotional hook can sometimes override the dry facts. Even shopping malls, they create these simulated environments of desire, totally detached from where the goods actually come from or how they're made.
It's really interesting how Baudrillard saw all this as, well, almost a natural societal shift, a consequence of how media and technology evolve.
Yeah, that's a crucial distinction to make about his original idea.
Right. For him, hyperreality is fundamentally a societal condition.
Right.
It's a byproduct of post-modernity media evolution. It's not some deliberate conspiracy orchestrated by shadowy figures.
He wasn't pointing fingers at controllers. He was describing a state we drifted into.
Once you start talking about reality being simulated, it's a very, very short step to asking, well, what if this isn't natural at all?
Wow.
What if someone is doing this on purpose? And that right there is where this theory takes a truly chilling turn.
Exactly. This is where the conspiracy theory, the one outlined in Hyperreality, the engineered illusion and consciousness control, takes Baudrillard's concept and really transforms it into something far darker.
Okay.
It posits that hyperreality isn't just some, natural societal evolution. Instead, it's seen as a deliberate, sophisticated, and pervasive control system.
Like the Matrix.
Very much like the Matrix, a construct designed specifically to trap human consciousness. And in this view, that blurring of real and fake, it's not accidental. It's a conscious strategy.
Strategy for what?
To disorient you, confuse you,
Yeah.
ultimately disempower you, keep you from seeing the real reality.
Wow. Okay. That's a huge leap from Baudrillard's original ideas. So, if this is supposedly an engineered illusion, who do the proponents claim is pulling the strings? Do they name names or groups?
Well, they certainly do. Proponents tend to point fingers at a few, maybe familiar suspects. You've got your global elite or secret societies, think Illuminati, deep state, New World Order kind of stuff.
The usual suspects for some theories.
Right. Others suggest it might be a powerful, maybe even rogue artificial intelligence AI running the whole show, a global simulation.
Okay. The Skynet scenario.
Yeah. And then some theories delve way into the metaphysical. They claim archons or extraterrestrials, these supposedly malevolent interdimensional entities, created this hyper-reality.
Why would they do that?
To harvest something called Loosh, which is essentially negative emotional energy from humans, fear, anger, suffering.
Loosh. Okay. That's out there.
It is. And finally, some theories implicate more terrestrial groups, shadow governments or the military-industrial complex, these covert factions using hyperreality as a massive tool for social engineering and control.
So a range of alleged architects. And the alleged why behind it all, this engineered illusion, it sounds equally chilling. What are they supposedly trying to achieve?
Well, the primary goal, according to most of these theories, is consciousness control and manipulation. Simple as that, but profound.
How so?
By controlling the information, the narratives, the very reality you perceive, the architects can supposedly shape your beliefs, your desires. They can prevent what proponents call a spiritual awakening or just basic critical thinking. It fosters dependence and disempowerment.
Keep people distracted and compliant.
Exactly. Now, if you buy into the Archon theory, the purpose shifts specifically to Loosh harvesting. Energetic slavery, essentially. Right. The whole environment is manipulated to maximize negative emotions, which these entities supposedly feed on.
Okay.
Then there's the aim of social engineering and predictive programming. The idea here is that they subtly introduce new norms, or even future events, into the collective consciousness through media, making them seem normal or inevitable when they happen.
Softening people up for things to come.
That's the idea. And of course, for the theories focused on human elites, it ultimately boils down to maintaining power and wealth.
Yeah.
Keeping the current structures in place. And maybe, just maybe, hiding a deeper truth about our universe, our origins, something profound they don't want us to know.
A grand distraction. And how? How do they supposedly maintain this hyperreal prison? What are the tools they allegedly use? Because it would have to be pervasive.
According to the theory, the tools are, well, all around us, basically embedded in modern life. Mainstream media, for starters. Yeah. Both news and entertainment. It's seen as prioritizing narrative and spectacle over actual facts, creating immersive, distracting experiences designed to pull your attention away from, true reality.
Okay, media saturation. Makes sense in this context.
Then there's social media and the internet. Huge tools in this model. They're depicted as creating echo chambers, reinforcing manufactured narratives, promoting superficiality, the whole influencer culture, essentially pulling consciousness away from authentic experience and making it easier to monitor and influence.
Right, the digital world as the prison bars.
You could say that.
Yeah.
Consumerism and advertising play a big role too, creating artificial desires, fostering a constant cycle of dissatisfaction to keep people chasing the next thing.
Keep them on the treadmill.
Exactly. Then you have more overt things like psychological operations, psyops, and propaganda deliberate campaigns to shape public opinion, sow division, control the narrative. Even educational systems sometimes get looped in, accused of promoting a narrow, materialist worldview that discourages people from questioning the fundamental nature of reality.
Discouraging deeper questions.
And for those who really believe, those perceived glitches in the matrix, like the Mandela effect, are cited as actual proof. Evidence that the controllers are actively tweaking or updating the simulation.
The Berenstain Bears thing.
That's the classic example, yeah. Those collective memory discrepancies.
So when proponents look at the world, what specific things do they point to as evidence for this hyperreal prison? How do they interpret, current events or trends?
Well, they interpret pretty much all major modern trends through this specific lens. Take the rise of fake news and disinformation.
Yeah.
From this perspective, it's not just an unfortunate byproduct of the internet age, no. It's seen as a deliberate strategy by the controllers.
To do what?
To create confusion, erode trust in all information sources, make people feel lost and therefore more susceptible to the manufactured narrative the controllers want them to believe. So chaos, basically.
Okay, I see the logic there within the theory. And what about the sheer pervasiveness of social media and virtual worlds? We touched on that.
Absolutely central. They're viewed as explicitly designed to pull our consciousness out of genuine embodied reality, to create a digital matrix where people can be more easily monitored, influenced, and even controlled.
The digital realm as the cage.
And concepts like manufactured consent, alongside the intense political polarization we see everywhere.
Yeah, that's undeniable.
The proponents see that as clear evidence of sophisticated social engineering, manipulating public sentiment, keeping people divided and fighting amongst themselves so they can't unite against the supposed elite agenda.
Divide and conquer.
It's a classic tactic attributed here to the controllers.
It's quite a comprehensive, if dark, worldview they've built. What else do they point to as signs?
Well, just the general feeling, the loss of authenticity and realness in modern life. That sense that things are becoming more artificial, more staged. That's cited as a direct symptom of living within this engineered illusion, where the copies have totally superseded the originals.
That feeling of fakeness.
Exactly. And then there's predictive programming in media. This is a big one for many proponents.
Explain that one.
It's the idea that movies, TV shows, even books, sometimes depict dystopian futures, pandemics, specific control systems, things that later seem to manifest in reality.
Like science fiction becoming fact.
Kind of, but they don't see it as coincidence or just writers being prescient. They interpret it as the controllers deliberately seeding these ideas into the collective subconscious.
Why would they do that?
To normalize these concepts, to make them seem less shocking or more inevitable when they actually happen, like pre-programming the population to accept certain future scenarios.
Okay. And the Mandela effect. We mentioned it as a glitch.
Yeah, those widespread collective false memories, Berenstain versus Berenstain Bears, lines from movies people misremember identically. Proponents see these as literal glitches, or maybe even reboots in the simulation.
Proof that reality isn't stable.
Proof that the controllers are actively tweaking things, changing the code of reality, so to speak.
And that feeling lots of people report, that sort of feeling of detachment or unreality, just a general sense of things being off.
Proponents absolutely seize on that. They see it as your subconscious mind recognizing the prison, a flicker of awareness that something is fundamentally wrong with the perceived reality, the true self trying to break through the illusion.
A built-in alarm system, almost.
In a way. And finally, just to loop back, the Loosh connection. For those who believe in the Archon version of the theory.
Right, the negative energy vampires.
Yeah. They argue that the constant promotion of fear, conflict, anger, and division in media and politics isn't accidental. It serves a specific purpose: to maximize the output of negative emotional energy Loosh for these parasitic entities to feed on.
Wow, okay. So that's the conspiracy side. Now, let's shift gears. How do mainstream academic and psychological perspectives view all this? They must have a very different take.
Oh, absolutely. A fundamentally different take. Mainstream scholarship, while definitely acknowledging the massive, undeniable influence of media and technology on our perception and society.
Which Baudrillard himself talked about.
Exactly. They acknowledge that influence, but they firmly reject the idea of a deliberate, coordinated, malevolent, hyperreality conspiracy pulling the strings.
So they accept the phenomenon to some extent, but not the plot.
Precisely. Baudrillard's concept, as we discussed earlier, is understood in academia as a powerful philosophical critique of postmodern society, a way to analyze trends. It's not treated as an allegation of a secret plot by some hidden cabal.
So the trends Baudrillard identified, the blurring lines, the image saturation, they see those as real.
Yes, as observable sociological phenomena, but driven by complex factors like market forces, the sheer speed of technological advancement, capitalism, and basic human psychology, not by a hidden group of puppet masters orchestrating everything.
That makes a lot of sense. And I imagine psychology has explanations for why people might believe in such a conspiracy, right? Those things proponents see as proof.
Definitely. There are well-understood psychological and cognitive biases that offer alternative explanations. Confirmation bias is huge here.
Explain that quickly.
It's our tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information in a way that confirms our pre-existing beliefs. So if you already suspect you're living in a matrix-like reality,
you'll see evidence for it everywhere.
Exactly. You'll interpret every ambiguous event, every weird coincidence as confirmation of the conspiracy while ignoring or downplaying evidence that contradicts it.
And just the sheer amount of information now.
That's another factor. Information overload. We're bombarded constantly in the digital age. It can genuinely lead to confusion, distrust, anxiety, even feelings of unreality, without needing any deliberate plot behind it. It's just overwhelming.
Yeah, it really can be.
Furthermore, those echo chambers and filter bubbles online, they're real, but they're mostly driven by algorithms designed to maximize engagement, keep you clicking.
Not necessarily by a shadowy cabal trying to control your thoughts.
Right. The effect might be reinforcing existing beliefs and polarization, creating a distorted view of reality for users. But the cause is more likely profit motives and algorithmic design, not some grand malevolent conspiracy.
And those feelings of unreality or detachment people experience?
Psychology offers other explanations. They can absolutely be symptoms of anxiety, depression, trauma, or just general disillusionment with modern life. It doesn't automatically mean reality itself is fake.
There are more mundane, though still serious, explanations.
Yes. And mainstream solutions to problems like fake news and disinformation focus on things like media literacy and critical thinking skills, empowering individuals to navigate the complex information landscape themselves, not assuming they're helpless pawns in a game.
Right, giving people tools, not just a conspiracy theory.
And crucially, from a scientific and investigative standpoint, there is simply no empirical evidence of a centralized controller. No proof of this global elite or AI or archons actually orchestrating this real prison. The sheer complexity and often chaotic nature of global systems makes that kind of monolithic control seem incredibly improbable, if not impossible.
It would be an unbelievably sophisticated operation.
Mind-bogglingly so.
And the specific evidence points, like predictive programming or the Mandela effect, how does the mainstream explain those?
Well, the idea of predictive programming is often explained as, well, coincidence or just the nature of creative genres. Dystopian futures are common sci-fi tropes because they reflect contemporary anxieties about technology, control, society. They offer fertile ground for compelling storytelling.
So writers are tapping into current feels, not receiving messages about the future.
Pretty much. Or maybe, in some limited cases, it could be a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, but not a pre-planned program from controllers. And the Mandela effect. Cognitive psychology has pretty solid explanations for that.
Like what?
It comes down to the known fallibility of human memory. Our memories aren't perfect recordings, they're reconstructive. We misremember things, we fill in gaps, that's confabulation. And crucially, misinformation can spread easily within groups, leading to shared false memories.
So it's about how our brains work, not glitches in reality's code.
That's the scientific consensus. There's no need to invoke timeline shifts or simulation reboots when cognitive psychology offers plausible explanations.
And things like Loosh and archons.
Those are squarely in the realm of metaphysical or spiritual claims. They are belief systems, articles of faith for some people, but they aren't scientifically verifiable phenomena that can be tested or proven empirically.
Okay, so we have Baudrillard's critique, the conspiracy theories leap, and the mainstream debunking. What does this all mean for you, our listener? Because despite the debunking, this theory, or variations of it, continues to resonate really deeply with a lot of people. Why?
That's the really fascinating question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why the enduring appeal? I think a big part of it is that it offers a seemingly coherent explanation for a world that often feels confusing, digitally mediated, and deeply disorienting.
It provides answers, even if they're extreme answers.
Exactly. It gives you a framework, and it offers the ultimate red pill narrative, doesn't it?
Yeah, the idea of waking up from the illusion.
It provides this powerful sense of awakening, a feeling of having access to forbidden knowledge, maybe even a sense of intellectual or spiritual superiority over the unenlightened masses still trapped in the simulation. That's very appealing.
And it taps into existing distrust, right?
Hugely. It resonates powerfully with a pervasive distrust of all authority governments, big corporations, mainstream media, even scientific institutions sometimes. If you already believe reality itself might be a lie, then all official narratives become suspect by default.
Nothing can be trusted.
Which feeds the theory further. Plus, we can't discount the sheer allure of the Matrix archetype. Popular culture, especially that movie, has made the whole idea of a simulated reality incredibly familiar, almost plausible in the back of our minds.
It planted a seed.
It really did. And think about it from a psychological perspective. In a world where many people feel genuinely powerless against huge, complex forces, this theory actually provides an enemy. It gives you a target for your frustration and a framework for understanding your own sense of disempowerment, which paradoxically can be strangely comforting. It's not just random chaos. There's a reason things feel wrong.
It imposes order on the chaos, even if it's a terrifying order.
Right. And it also speaks directly to that deep human search for authenticity. In a world that often does feel increasingly artificial, mediated, and superficial, the idea of breaking through to something real is incredibly powerful. It taps into a genuine yearning.
A desire for something genuine.
Absolutely. And finally, let's not forget the sheer existential thrill of it all, contemplating the idea that your entire existence might be an elaborate illusion. It's a profound thought experiment. It can be terrifying, yes, but also kind of intellectually stimulating. It forces you to question everything.
Okay, so just to recap, we've taken a pretty deep dive today into this whole hyperreality, the engineered illusion in consciousness control theory. We looked at its philosophical roots way back with Baudrillard's work.
Which was more of a societal critique.
Right, and then we followed its evolution into these really chilling claims of it being a deliberately constructed prison of perception, complete with controllers and hidden agendas.
And we've seen how mainstream views, while definitely acknowledging the huge influence of media and technology on how we see the world, draw a very sharp line. They differentiate strongly from the notion of some malevolent orchestrated conspiracy.
Yeah.
But what's truly fascinating, I think, is how the theory's enduring appeal seems to lie in its power to explain that pervasive sense of confusion, maybe detachment that many of us feel today. It offers this dramatic unveiling of a hidden truth.
So as you, our listener, navigate your daily life amidst the endless stream of images, information, online interactions, all these experiences maybe consider the whispers of hyperreality we've talked about. Is our world just a very complex, technologically advanced, maybe overwhelming society?
Which is complex enough.
Which is complex enough. Or is it, as some believe, something more? A sophisticated engineered illusion, maybe? Its dazzling surfaces designed deliberately to keep us trapped? Maybe unaware of a truer reality lying just beyond the veil.
And this really raises an important closing question for you to think about. How do you discern what's genuinely real in a world that is undeniably saturated with simulations, with copies, with mediated experiences? And maybe more practically, what steps can you take to cultivate your own sense of authenticity, your own connection to reality, in the face of so much that feels hyperreal?